I got another Tip Tuesday video for you guys today. In this video, we're going to go over the top 5 things to look for when it comes to choosing a blackjack table to play at. All right, it's going to be in order of kind of from least important to most important for my top 5. So we're going to start with number 5 on this list. Before we do though, I am going to give you a quiz at the end of this video. So stick around for that because I'm going to list out kind of 3 different tables. And after learning some things about this video, I'm interested to see which table you guys would play at. And I'll show you that quiz here at the end of this video. That said, number 5 on my list, the kind of 5th most important thing that I look for when it comes to choosing a blackjack table is the number of decks. Is it a double deck game? Is it a 6-deck game? Or is it even an 8-deck game? So sometimes you might find single deck games still, but they're becoming increasingly more rare. However, double, 6, and 8 deck are going to be what you find at most casinos. Sometimes they'll only have 6 deck. Sometimes they'll have a combination of 6 and double. But anyway, what is better for the player? Well, double deck is the best for the player because there are fewer decks. You can get a more true count, right? We take our running count divided by the number of decks left to get what's called a true count. Well, if there's fewer decks remaining, then you're going to have a more true count compared to something like if you'd be dividing by, 5 decks left in a 6-deck shoe or something like that. That's not as true of a true count compared to with less decks remaining. All right, so double deck is best, then 6-deck, and then 8-deck in terms of which is best for the player. Number 4 on my list is going to be kind of the other rules that the table allows. For example, is it an H17 table or an S17 table? Do you even know what that means? An H17 table is when the dealer has an ace-6, a soft 17, then they're going to hit on that soft 17. Whereas an S17 table is if they're ace-6, they would stand on their soft 17. S17 tables are better for the player compared to H17 tables. So if you can find an S17 table with all the other same rules, that's going to be slightly better than an H17 table. All right, other rules that I would lump into this category are going to be double after split. Does your table allow doubling after you split? Like if you had a pair of 3s and you split them and maybe you draw an 8 on one, can you now double on that 11? Well, that would be an example of double after split. That's better for the player because you can get more money on the table in those advantageous situations compared to a table that does not allow doubling after you split. Other rules in this would be resplitting aces, very similar. If you get a pair of aces and you split and then you draw another ace, some tables do not allow you to resplit that 3rd ace. All right, if it does, again, that's going to be better for the player compared to those that don't. Surrender is another rule that I would throw into this category. If you are allowed to surrender, that's better because there's some hands that have such bad expected value. It is better to lose half of your bet by surrendering than to play that out by hitting or standing. Okay, another thing that I'd throw into this category as well is the table limits. All right. If you are a card counter, you want to have as big of a bet spread as your bankroll allows. And so a lower table limit is typically going to be better for you as you can start real low and play those minimum, $5 or $10 bets in those really small to negative counts compared to raising it quite a ways when you have a bigger count, right? And that's going to give you a bigger bet spread and thus allow you to beat that game faster and to kind of get to the long run faster, I should say, with those more widespread limits. All right, number 3 on my list is going to be penetration. And what I mean by that is where does the dealer place the cut card? So when they have, let's say it's a 6-deck game like this, and one cut card of course goes at the back, so you can't see that last card, but where this card goes, the next one is going to be really important. All right, if it is further back into the deck, that is better for the player compared to somewhere closer towards the beginning, that is worse for the player. The reason for this is because what I said earlier about why double deck was better, you can get a more true count the further this is back, because by the time you play and get to about here or so, you're gonna have a really good sense of what the true count is, and it's gonna be more true compared to a game that cuts it off further up as there's more cards left and you'd be dividing by a bigger divisor, and therefore you wouldn't have as accurate of a true count. Number 2 on my list is going to be rounds per hour. The faster we can play as a card counter, the quicker we're going to get to the long run and have that math kind of work out in our favor quicker. All right, now you can judge rounds per hour before you sit down at a table a few different ways. One, if the table is completely full except for one spot that you would sit at, that's probably going to be a really slow table compared to if you were the only one at the table, or maybe it was just you and one other person. All right, heads up with the dealer, just you and the dealer is going to probably be the fastest. That's going to be pretty beneficial for you, as you're going to be pumping through those rounds a lot quicker than at a full table where everyone else has to make those decisions. Sometimes they're playing side bets and things like that, and it just takes such a long time, and it's really hard for you to get to the long run quick. All right, another way you can judge is not to discriminate or something, but if it's a young dealer versus an old dealer, typically the younger dealers deal faster. Sometimes the experience can help, and they can, it can have an older dealer who's a little faster, but you'll just have to judge that for yourself. Another thing to consider when it comes to rounds per hour is if you're playing double deck and it's a pitch game, that's typically going to take a lot longer than a double deck game played out of a shoe. So if both options are available with all the other same rules, and one's pitch versus one is out of a shoe, the shoe game double deck is probably going to be a little bit faster. All right, the last thing I'll say about rounds per hour is if you're not quite sure still, you can always stand behind the table and just time somebody and just see how many rounds they get in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. And you can even probably count on your fingers if you have one table versus another table. Just set a clock for 5 minutes and count both and see. However, I will say that time that you're spending doing that, you probably could be playing. So just keep that in mind as well. But if you're sitting there waiting for the shuffle, maybe that's a good option for you. All right, guys, before I get to number 1 on my list, I want to talk to you a little bit about Blackjack Apprenticeship. They're how I learned how to count cards. They have a training suite in their membership where you can practice before you kind of take your money to the casino to make sure you are 100% accurate. They also have Casino 411 on there that shows you sort of what tables have which rules at which casinos, and that's going to be a very beneficial tool for you when it comes to planning trips and things like that. There's a results tracker on there as well, so you can kind of keep track of your hours, your expected value, and your profit, as well as there's a video course in which Colin Jones, the founder of Blackjack Apprenticeship, goes through a pretty decently lengthy video course talking you through from the A to Z of what it takes to become a professional card counter. However, the thing that I probably use the most on Blackjack Apprenticeship's member site is the pro betting software. In here, you can kind of set your bet spreads, your bankroll, the different rules that are allowed at the table, so that you know exactly your expected value and your risk of ruin before you ever put down a single bet. Right? It is by far worth the money just to have the pro betting software, but the other tools are extremely valuable as well. So if you're interested in checking them out, you can check out the link that I have in the pinned comment of this video. Otherwise, let's get back to number 1 on my list. All right, and last thing on my list when it comes to choosing a specific blackjack table to play at is that blackjacks themselves must pay out 3-2. If your blackjack table pays out 6-5, do not sit down at that table. It might look tempting, it might be like a $5 bet with other rules that are pretty good. Maybe it's even S17, or the penetration is really good, something like that. But that said, it is going to be so much worse for you because that blackjack pays out 6-5. In fact, a 3-2 blackjack table typically has a house edge of around 0.5%, whereas a 6-5 table can be well into the 1.5%, even close to 2% house edge in some cases, which when you just look at those numbers at face value, you might think that's not a huge difference. But when it comes to stacking those numbers over and over and over and over again, as card counters, we have to play the law of large numbers, where we take a really small edge, play it hundreds of thousands of times to kind of gain in the long run. Well, that difference in a few percentage points is going to make a huge difference in the long run. In fact, you will hardly ever gain the edge at a 6-5 table, and so it's not even worth sitting down and placing a bet. It's not even worth back counting. All right, if you know what that is, do not even waste your time with a 6 to 5 table. I will say that some blackjack tables are getting a little bit sneakier at hiding what blackjack pays. So if it doesn't say somewhere very clear on the felt that it's a 3 to 2 table, make sure you ask the dealer, all right? They have to tell you. And so if they say it's a 6 to 5 table, just keep walking, all right? Or maybe even tell them, hey, can we get rid of these 6 to 5 tables here? They're worthless, all right? Maybe talk to a manager or something about that, because the less 6 to 5 tables that are out there, the better it is going to be, not just for card counters, but for everyone who ever places a bet in blackjack. All right, I promised you guys a quiz at the end of this video, and I have kind of a quiz for you here with 3 different tables. And I'm just going to read through the rules quick, and then I want you guys to comment down below which table would you play at. All right, so table 1 is going to be 3 to 2. In fact, all these are 3 to 2 because that's my #1 rule, so don't worry too much about that. But this is going to be a 3 to 2 table. It is double deck, all right, but it's a pitch game. It says there's one other player that's currently sitting at this table, so you're going to get about 90 rounds per hour. However, it does have a $50 minimum and a $10,000 maximum. The penetration here is going to be 1.3 decks, which means that there's 0.7 decks cut off. So it'd be about looking like that for where the cut card would be in terms of what they'd be holding in their hand, since it's a pitch game. Right? It also is an H17 table. It has double after split. You are able to resplit aces, but there is no surrender available at that table. Table number 2 is a 3 to 2 blackjack game. It is 6 deck. There's 4 other players at the table, and so you're only going to get 45 rounds per hour. However, this is a $5 minimum, but it goes up to $500 for the max. It's going to have penetration of 5 decks, so there's only 1 deck cut off. It's going to be S17. It does have double after split. You cannot resplit your aces, and there's also not surrender at table number 2. Table number 3 is also 3 to 2. It's 6 deck. You're playing heads up, so just you and the dealer. You're going to get 180 rounds per hour at this table. The minimum is $25. The maximum is $2,500. The penetration here is going to be 4.7, so there's 1.3 decks behind the cut card. It's an S17 table. Double after split is allowed. You are not allowed to resplit your aces. However, there is surrender available to you. All right, so each of these tables has some pros and each of them has some cons. So let me know down below, which table would you choose and why? The big thing I want to know is why you would choose that specific table. I think some people might choose one versus another. So I'm interested to see kind of what you have for that. And once you've commented that, you might be interested in this video on how you can beat casinos other ways besides blackjack.